I would best describe the installation manual as a small pamphlet that was originally written in Chinese that has been translated poorly to English that may be for a different model of stereo. Hello YouTube, this is Big Rob, and on today's video I'm going to be discussing the ABSOSO 7-inch double DIN media player. This is a stereo replacement sold by Amazon for just over $90. I will be giving a brief review and then we will discuss whether or not this radio is a good option for you. As you can see, I have started the conversion on my van. I haven't got very far. We've removed some shelves, we've worked on the floor, but I wanted to take a break and do something that I actually know how to do, which was install a decent stereo. This van came with the stock AM/FM radio, and that just wouldn't do. So I went to Amazon, I started looking for stereos, and what I found was this new generation of media players. Now, this stereo does not have a disc loading slot. It will not play CDs, it will not play DVDs. This is ideal if you want to play Bluetooth media from your phone, if you want to play music, videos, or photos from a USB stick, from a micro SD card. It also has an auxiliary input if you're super old school, you want to run that cable around. So not ideal if you've still got that large collection of cassette tapes stowed underneath your van seat, or you got some CDs or maybe DVDs, you want to go to Redbox and watch some movies. This is not going to be the head unit for you. But if most of your content that you want to watch is able to be streamed through your phone to Bluetooth, or you can store it on a USB stick or a micro SD card, then this will probably work for you. So the very first thing that I want to mention right off the bat is that this stereo is sold on Amazon as a double DIN stereo. Now, if you're not familiar with DIN sizes, what you would call a half-size radio, what I would call a half-size radio, is known as a single DIN radio, and a larger radio would be a double DIN. That is one that takes up basically two slots on the radio. So if you're looking for a bigger size radio, this is a double DIN. Double DIN is a standard size. You should be able to buy any double DIN stereo, and it should fit in any double DIN stereo dash, and this one doesn't. It's too large. This is a standard double DIN size hole on the Ford Econoline van. I bought a double DIN template to go over the stereo. That fits fine. This stereo is too large. This stereo is probably half an inch too tall to fit into a stock double DIN stereo opening. So that meant for this van, using a Dremel and cutting open some space around the bottom of the stereo, and it still does not fit. The top part comes out from the dash a little bit. It looks okay, and especially if you have a dark dash, and this is a dark stereo, so it doesn't look terrible. It doesn't really look that out of place, and if you know what you're looking at, you can see that it doesn't sit flush, but I'm okay with the way it sits right now. But definitely, if you're buying this for any kind of car that has a sunken in double DIN, you might want to double think it, because this does not fit. Again, double DIN stereos are a standard size. Essentially, every double DIN stereo should fit into a double DIN opening. So we had to Dremel out side railings all the way around the inside of the stereo, and then parts of the dash itself, just to get this to slide in. So it's definitely not a standard size. It's not a good fit. Now let's get into the features of this actual device. Number one, obviously it has an AM/FM radio tuner. There's a typical plug on the back for an antenna wire, so that's not a problem. The Bluetooth paired almost too easily. I couldn't find anything in the instructions on how to begin the Bluetooth pairing process, but once the radio was powered up, I looked on my phone under Bluetooth devices and the radio was there, and I connected without putting a passcode or anything. So that was almost too simple. It's a little scary, and I'm hoping other people aren't able, passengers or people walking by on the sidewalk aren't able to just pair to my stereo without knowing any sort of code. Next up is the media player. So if you insert a USB stick with videos into the device, it will immediately begin playing the first video on the list. It generates its own playlist. It takes every video on your USB stick, sorts them alphabetically, and will start playing through the entire list. Now you can go back through the menu system and dive down into the actual folder structure and play specific videos, but when you insert that USB stick right off the bat, it will just alphabetically find the first video and begin to play that. So it's a little strange. I mean, it's kind of convenient if you wanted to just start playing. This device does support Bluetooth phone calls, hands-free calling, but it does not come with a microphone. So it has a microphone port on the back of the device, and so I had to buy my own microphone. That was another $10 off of Amazon. It's connected through a wire. We just had to run a wire through the dash. It wasn't a big deal. And now I can do voice-free calling. You can actually dial phone numbers from your dash if that's what you want to do, although I think most of the time when I'm calling somebody, I would just use Siri on my phone. One of the nice things about this device is that it actually has a line of physical buttons on the left-hand side. There's a button that will take you always back to the home screen. There are forward and back skip buttons, and there is a physical volume knob. Now, I looked at some other devices that were actually more expensive than this one, and they do not have a volume knob. I think if I were to turn, I have a bad habit of turning my stereo up really loud and then turning my key off and going in the house. So when I come back in, sometimes the radio is really loud. So I thought it would be more convenient to have this dial, an actual physical knob. That's something that I wanted. Also, that knob presses in and it will mute the sound. So that's also convenient. If I had one complaint about the interface, it would be that it looks a little dated. This looks like something from the early 2000s, not something from 2022. Now, the actual touchscreen is very reactive. It's very sensitive. It works good. You can scroll through the menus. I haven't had a problem with the touchscreen itself, but the layout, the icons, the actual design look a little Y2K to me. It does work. There are lots of options once you start getting down into the menus. You can change the color of the LED backlights. There aren't that many choices. There are like 7 different colors you can make. You can pick red, blue, green, you know, all the normal colors, but it's not like some of the new, like I have Wi-Fi light bulbs where I can choose from 16 million different colors. So it's not quite like that. There's only, I think, 7 choices, but if you're happy with choosing, you know, a general red or a general yellow or blue or something like that, then that will work. Now, let's talk a little bit about the backup camera. This device for $92 comes with a backup camera. It comes with a long wire that runs from the front of your car all the way to the rear. When they were designing that wire, I don't think they had a 20-foot cargo van in mind. The wiring has to run from your car stereo. In my van, it has to run through the dash over to the fuse panel, down alongside the driver's side door, up this post behind me, all the way down where the stock wiring is, all the way across the ceiling to get over to the other door, down, and then through the door where the actual camera is installed. Now, I want to talk about the instructions that come with this radio in just a moment, but I do want to tell you that we could not figure out how to install the rear backup camera system. There were no real instructions in the manual on how to do this, and so we had to watch multiple YouTube videos. If you're looking for assistance with that, there are some videos out there, but I will give you a hint. The video cable does run, there's an RCA video cable, and that does run from the stereo all the way to the back. If you are like me, you're old school stereo guy, and you're thinking, I've got to get power from the front of the van all the way back to the camera, that's not correct. What you've got to do is tie in your power in the back of the van to your reverse lights. The way this stereo is designed is that once it detects a 12-volt power being applied to the camera, it switches the video screen from the stereo to the camera's input. So you don't have to switch anything. It's just like a normal car where you put it in reverse and your reverse camera comes on. Well, that's how it does it. It detects the 12 volts that run on an included wire that comes with that. It's bundled in next to that AV wire. And so when you apply power to the back of the van to your reverse lights, it sends that 12 volt signal up to the stereo, which detects that you have 12 volts and switches over to that input. So it's a little bit reverse way of thinking. Normally you would think you would send power back to the camera, but actually you're getting power back there and sending it up here. Now, there are inputs for a front camera as well. Through the menu system, you can choose front camera. You can't choose the backup camera. So what some people have done that have had trouble doing their wiring is they just hook it to the front camera input and then they choose it from the menu when you're backing up, and that's totally fine, but we were able to get it to work. Now, one thing that we did not think about is we ran power from the front all the way to the back because the actual LED lights that come with the camera need power as well. That was a great idea on our part. However, the lights are now on all the time. I have 4 bright LED lights surrounding a camera that anytime my car is started or even in the accessory position, those LED lights are on. So what we're gonna have to do is change that input to either a fuse that controls the rear backup lights, or just wire it directly also to the same backup lights so that those lights only come on when the van is in reverse. Now, before I recommend or not recommend this stereo, I want to tell you a little bit about the instructions that came with this stereo. The stereo came with 2 booklets. One was the installation pamphlet. I don't even want to call it a book. The other one is the user manual. I would best describe the installation manual as a small pamphlet that was originally written in Chinese that has been translated poorly to English, that may be for a different model of stereo. It was, for the most part, very unhelpful. I ordered a wiring harness to hook up to my factory wiring for the Ford Econoline to go to this. The instructions that came with this stereo talked about things like a blue wire. There is no blue wire. We really had to just kind of wing it and figure out, obviously there is a wiring diagram on the bottom of the stereo that tells you what colors go to what, but there were a lot of wires. Like there's one wire that's supposed to hook up to the parking brake, but I don't know why you would do that, and so we didn't hook that up. There are other wires. There's one wire that says it's labeled B+. I don't know what B+ is. I mean, it's not ground, it's not hot. I don't know what that's supposed to be used for. So we just didn't hook some of those things up, and everything seems to be working. One thing about the parking brake wire, I read that a lot of the more name brand stereos, like your Kenwoods, your JVCs, your Sonys, things like that, have a lockout system that will prevent you from watching videos on your stereo while the car is driving or in drive. Apparently, not really a problem in China. This has no lockout system that I can find. You can play videos, you can watch picture slideshows, you can do anything you want while the car is moving or while it's in park. So not necessarily the safest choice to be playing videos, and may not be even legal in your part of the country, but it does appear to work. The owner's manual that comes with the stereo is not much better than the installation manual. Some of the options in there don't appear to be in my stereo. There's a couple of menus that it talks about that I can't find. So it is a general guide as to how to use the stereo. But there is one interesting thing in there. Now, this stereo does not support the official CarPlay like some of the more expensive stereos, but it does seem to support some type of mirroring. So you can take your phone and plug it directly into the USB port on the front of the stereo. With that cable connected, your phone will go into a debug mode. You can download an APK for the stereo, and eventually you can pair these things up and you can mirror what's on your phone directly on the stereo. Personally, I don't have a reason to do that at the moment, because I would just put videos on a USB stick or put it on a micro SD card, because it has both of those slots directly on the front of the unit. But if you wanted to use it maybe for a secondary GPS, you didn't have a phone mount in your van and you wanted to mirror your GPS app to this, maybe you wanted to mirror Spotify or Pandora, something like that while you're driving, it does seem like you could do that. It's not wireless. You do have to have that USB cable connected, but that is another option. And again, that USB port is right here on the front. You can see the USB. You've got these physical buttons that run up and down the left-hand side, and then across the top, you can see right here like that the stereo is muted. This is your options to go into EQ settings or other settings. You always have this back icon that will take you back one menu choice, and then there is a software home button if you're not on the home screen. I have found it a little bit confusing as to how to flip through the different menus, but eventually when I press enough buttons, I get to where I need to be. So is the ABSOSO 7-inch CA70BT the device for you? Well, that depends. First of all, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you have physical media like CDs, DVDs, cassette tapes, anything like that you're trying to play, not for you. This is really, I think, for the younger generation. This is for people that stream everything from their phone, Bluetooth music, even things off of USB and micro SD seem pretty old school at this point. So unless you're streaming, probably not the device for you. Second of all, if you are an amateur at installing stereos, this is probably not for you, or maybe you could get a friend to help you that knows more about it, or a local stereo shop to install it. Although I think if you went to a local stereo shop, they would just try to sell you something that they have. The wiring was confusing at first. We did walk through it. Again, I'm not a professional electronics installer. I've probably installed 24 car stereos in my life, just different cars that I've owned and cars that friends have owned. But most of that experience came 10 or 20 years ago, where it involved hooking up, a hot wire, a ground wire, and wiring up some speakers. So this was a little bit of a beast for me. I think the harness, had 18 wires, something like that. So there was definitely some soldering and connections to make everything clean. And again, along with all that wiring stuff, physically this does not fit in my dash. So that could possibly be an issue. Oh, and I can't find a website for this company. There is a firmware, and on Amazon it talks about firmware upgrades, but I can't find a firmware. I found one forum thread about people who have tried to upgrade the firmware and have bricked the device, so I'm probably not going to mess with the firmware. I'm just going to leave it as is. It does what it does, and I will leave it at that. So for less than $100, I got a Bluetooth stereo. I got a stereo that plays videos. I got something that will play USB and SD card media files. So I'm pretty happy with that. It is way better than the AM FM radio that came installed in the van. So I'm happy with all that. But if you're not comfortable with possibly dribbling out additional space in your dash, going through, trying to figure out what wires go to what, doing a little bit of exploring, then this might not be the stereo for you.